He was waiting for Washington to bow down before him. He was very, very angry when it did not, fully do so. But also, I think he felt there was an asterisk, frankly, hanging over his presidency, both because Hillary Clinton had defeated him in the popular vote and because of the questions around the Russian interference in the election, which he felt cast a pall over the legitimacy of his presidency. This time, right, he claims an overwhelming mandate, the biggest mandate in the history of the world. He's much more about actually not seeking approval anymore. And that scares me, frankly. And I do think that that's part of what's going on right now is that it's more about the exercise of power, the embrace of the most radical possible both ideas and people who are willing to carry out those ideas.
Yeah, in the first Trump administration, he had all these firewalls, as you really definitely pointed out in your first book, that he had all these roadblocks of people and of procedures and of norms and of just not knowing what he was doing. But over the past 4 years has built up this enormous apparatus that is now operating with lightning speed. And I'm wondering, because I feel taken aback by that. I didn't realize he would have this entire ecosystem around him to do all this so quickly. And I'm just wondering, as someone who follows this very closely and lives in Washington and has reported on this for many years, if you saw that coming as well.
Look, I'm always mindful of our experience in Russia. And, there was an old Soviet saying from the Stalinist times, actually, that cadres decide everything. And so who you have around you in government tells you about your ability to push through your agenda, whether it's radical or not. And in the first Trump term, as you pointed out, I think the story of it, the story that we told in The Divider, was a story of Trump facing constraints both within his own administration and from his party. It was a still not fully complete takeover of the Republican Party that we were watching. And so a lot of the most consequential fights in many ways were kind of rear guard actions, mopping up operations at times with the Republican Party. And that included officials inside his own government, as well as, those lone voices of dissent on Capitol Hill who have become so rare now as to be vanishingly hard to find. And so that was a lot of the drama of Trump 1.0. Flash forward, and there was a very concerted effort on the right. Donald Trump is not, it's important to underscore that, he is not himself a creature of the ideological modern American right. That's not where he comes from. It's not why he came into politics. It's not who his natural people are. However, he has fused with those people. And I would point you to actually quite a remarkable interview that my old colleague from Politico magazine did the other day, Michael Hirsch, with the guy who was the purged creator of Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. He's the guy who pulled that whole project together and then was fired. I don't know if you remember when Trump was sort of lying to the public during the 2024 campaign and saying, oh no, that has nothing to do with us. That's not our agenda at all. Like, how outrageous. And so they fired this guy as sort of a, sacrificial, proof, quote unquote, that they weren't really setting the agenda for the second Trump term. He gave this interview just a couple days ago in which he says, well, of course they're enacting Project 2025. In fact, it's, quote, succeeded beyond my wildest dreams in such a short period of time. But what's notable is that, again, that represents a kind of an ideological Bible, a wish list, if you will, of the American conservative project to tear down the federal government, which is, decades in the making. Again, Trump has sort of merged with this, but he is not this. So then there are also other camps that exist. There's the kind of hardcore Trump personal loyalists. There's the tech bro converts to the right wing. There are, of course, the Christian evangelical voters who make up the huge core of the Republican Party's voting base. And without them, Donald Trump never would have had one term, never mind two, even though, of course, he himself is the farthest thing one could imagine from, being a personal subscriber to their ideology. So I wanted to lay that out and make that point, because when you look at why is he able to do this? Because there are cadres of Republicans who've been waiting years, if not decades, to enact this agenda. Number one. So they are now in government. Number two, Trump is burned. And the most important thing to him in appointing this new leadership of the government was personal loyalty to him. And that there would be no dissent brooked like the way John Kelly or Jim Mattis or Rex Tillerson in the first term disagreed and even stymied many of his plans. That's number two, loyalty, personal loyalty. And then number three is a willingness to defy the law that definitely is emboldened by a Trump who's determined to get revenge and retribution after what he feels are the wrongs done to him. And so his own, I think, radicalization is also the third factor that I would identify here.
And so, do you see him as a changed man from the first term in terms of this kind of bitter obsession with retribution? He always seemed to have that strain in him, but now he's obviously letting it flow. You see what he's doing with the law firms, for example. He's punishing the law firms who worked for Democrats or who helped Jack Smith pro bono in some of his cases against Trump. And so, just as a man and his personality, as you observe him, how has he changed since when you first wrote the book, The Divider?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you're exactly right that Donald Trump is still Donald Trump. Remember, he is like a very set in his ways 78-year-old guy. He's really not processing a lot of new information. It's I used to call it the bad boyfriend theory, right? It's like, he's not going to change people. So he is who he is, and he's always had an exaggerated sense of grievance. He remembers every wrong ever done to him. He's still mad he didn't win that Emmy, 20 years ago. So he's the same guy. Many of his preoccupations are still his preoccupations, whether it's taking over Greenland, which, by the way, we found out in doing the book, The Divider, actually had been a preoccupation for him. It only became public for a brief kind of moment, and people kind of laughed at it in the summer of 2019. But what we found out in doing the reporting after Trump left office was that none of us had known about this, but he had actually been pestering his cabinet secretaries and talking about it for years leading up to when he mentioned it in public. He had even tried to press some of his cabinet secretaries saying, why don't we trade Puerto Rico for Greenland in his first term? It just never became public. So many of the themes are still Donald Trump's themes. What's different, and certainly the desire for vengeance, the obsession with enemies and retribution against them, no matter how petty that retribution might be. But I would say when he first came into office 8 years ago, he still cared in many ways about receiving the respect that he felt was owed to him, by more conventional establishment. He was still sort of the insecure outsider from Queens who wanted the people in Manhattan to give him his due deference. And that was definitely, I think, how he approached Washington. He was waiting for Washington to bow down before him. He was very, very angry when it did not, fully do so. But also, I think he felt there was an asterisk, frankly, hanging over his presidency, both because Hillary Clinton had defeated him in the popular vote and because of the questions around the Russian interference in the election, which he felt cast a pall over the legitimacy of his presidency. This time, right, he claims an overwhelming mandate, the biggest mandate in the history of the world, which, fact check, it's not, but it was a bigger win. He defeated Kamala Harris by more, in a significantly meaningful way, more votes than he defeated Hillary Clinton. He won the popular vote, although just under 50% of the vote. So he didn't win a majority. And he's much more about actually not seeking approval anymore. And that scares me, frankly. And I do think that that's part of what's going on right now is that it's more about the exercise of power, the embrace of the most radical possible both ideas and people who are willing to carry out those ideas.